protesters should start to set up the place for the prayer. Then the protest will start afterwards.
Okay, Ahmed, thank you very much for giving us a view there from Alexandria. Of course, we are monitoring the situation in Egypt very closely, as well as online. Let's go over now to our Egypt desk, where Imran Khan is looking at social media sites. Imran.
Well, Folly, our website, aljazeera.net, is getting a hell of a lot of hits, and you guys are getting your voices heard, so keep that up. We do want more of it, though, so get on the site and react. Our live blog is being updated regularly and offers a play-by-play of the situation in Egypt. Also, we've got dedicated web reporters who are in Egypt, and they're sending in video and audio. Like I say, it's all happening on aljazeera.net/English. Now, the internet is back open in Egypt, and the micro-blogging site Twitter is also constantly being updated. There are lots of tweets coming through reporting the arrests of bloggers, activists, journalists, and others. Now, according to one of our correspondents on the ground, nearly 24 have either been attacked, arrested, or are simply just unaccounted for. Now, Nadia continues the harassment theme in her tweet. She says, all journalists and camera have been evacuated from the square. Please act now. It will be a disaster. Salma, though, is keeping her spirits up. My life and the life of many others was saved by everyone in Tahrir last night. The more the number, the safer everyone is. Be brave. And this tweet from Sultan Al-Qassami on the allegation that some pro-Mubarak supporters were paid. The military arrested 38 policemen and 22 citizens. The NDP paid them, the thugs, to stage pro-Mubarak demonstrations. Footage from YouTube now. This appears to be people making Molotov cocktails in Tahrir Square. It's claimed that the people are government supporters who supplied the ingredients to attack other demonstrators. They're shouting, oh God, this is new video sent into us. It shows a pitch battle going on very early on Thursday morning. And also from the same night, protesters bang metal crates to try and keep away pro-Mubarak supporters. You can, of course, see all of these tweets and images via our live blog on our website. These are our updates for now, Folly.
Okay, do we have time to ask Imran another question or not? Okay, Imran, I was going to ask you, in Tunisia, of course, the social media networks played a great role in the uprising there. In fact, some people were calling it the Twitter revolution. I wanted to know, how big of a role have these networks played in Egypt when you take into account that internet was shut down for a number of days there?
Well, it seems the Egyptian government learned from the lessons of Tunisia. They realized that Tunisians were able to network, they were able to make gatherings through things like Facebook, through things like Twitter, and so they were very scared. So very early on, when this began, they cracked down on the internet. And you remember, it was the biggest crackdown in the internet's history. And then, of course, that cell phone ban as well. So the Egyptian government clearly knew that the internet, those cell phones, were a problem. They allowed people to organize. Also, the flow of information, and that's crucial. The flow of information when on the internet is much faster than we've ever seen before. So although Twitter and Facebook and other social media networking sites aren't the driver behind these things, they certainly are a facilitator for what's being called, you know, the Egyptian revolution.
Thank you very much, Imran. That strategy of cutting the internet certainly not working, because we are getting information. We'll be going back to Imran, of course, in the next few minutes here on Al Jazeera. Right now, let's hear from one of the Egyptian journalists who has been covering the events of the last few days. Her name is Shahira Amin. She was a senior journalist at Nile Television, that's a state-owned television, until she walked out on Wednesday in anger that state TV wasn't broadcasting enough of the protests and clashes that have been going on in Tahrir Square. Earlier, she explained what it's been like for her.
I am deputy head of the channel. The regime has used the carrot and stick approach. Every time I get a story out on one of the foreign news networks, and then I've managed to get away telling my stories. I've done stories about the tightest refugees, about the sectarian unrest, subjects that were taboo on Egyptian television. Well, I've had calls before from state security, been followed all over, both inside Egypt and outside. I've had people telling me that this is the last time I do this or else, and telling me that I can disappear off the face of the earth, I feel liberated. I'm relieved.
One Egyptian journalist telling us there about her experience working in Cairo these last few days. Well, parts of the Egyptian capital are certainly very dangerous at the moment, and many foreigners are getting out as quickly as they can. Jane Araf reports now on the mass exodus.
It's not the way they would have liked to have returned. But these Iraqis say their fear of what might happen in Egypt outweighed their worry over safety in Iraq.
I think things accelerated just like this. Nobody was expecting that.
These are not your huddled masses. This is Iraq's middle class. It's professors and engineers and accountants. They're needed here, but almost all want to go back to Egypt as soon as things settle. It started to become worse, says this master's student. All the banks were closed. We couldn't get cash.
What's happening in Egypt is sending shockwaves throughout the region. Hardly anyone here would ever have dreamed that what's happening would make Iraq seem stable by comparison.
Uday Latif Daoud left in the height of the civil war and was worried about coming back here with his 3-month-old twins.
It was becoming worse day by day, especially a shortage of gasoline and bread. That's why we were afraid events would escalate.
It was the breakdown of law and order that prompted the decision to evacuate citizens, says Iraq's foreign minister. Exactly what so many were fleeing here when they left.
Many of them settled in Egypt because of the security challenges, because of the violence, because of the sectarian killing in the streets of Baghdad and other cities, and the car bombs. Now they are the ones who are seeking safety in their home country.
In the Baghdad cafes, people watch this revolution in the making with fascination. When Iraqis in southern and northern Iraq rose up against Saddam Hussein after the 1991 war, they were shot in the streets. It was more than a decade later that U.S. forces toppled Saddam.
Any authentic nation that enjoys a long civilization would prefer that change comes from within.
Egypt has seen a relatively peaceful uprising, they say, but it's not over yet. Jane Araf, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Well, it's certainly very interesting and astonishing to see Iraqis leave Egypt for the safety of Baghdad, if you can call it that. We're speaking to Dr. Omar Ashur, a lecturer in politics at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies at the University of Exeter. He joins us from London. I was just going to ask you before, are you surprised at all at the turn of events in Egypt, at the nature of the violence of the last few days? Or do you think that this was something that perhaps we should have expected?
No, I to a large degree, I expected some violence on the part of the regime, because basically the protest undermines all its claims, undermines its interests, and principally undermines its head. And therefore they would have fought back. I just didn't expect how ugly are the tactics. So the idea of releasing convicts, or what we saw yesterday in front of the whole world, attacking peaceful demonstrators that just one day before, 2 million of them were sitting in Tahrir Square in the most civilized way.
Do you think the regime sponsored or tolerated the violence we saw yesterday?
Yeah, there is no doubt. I mean, the Prime Minister already mentioned something like that he's going to do an investigation. There is already NDP senior figures like Mustafa al-Fiqi who is saying it's pretty much a regime-sponsored violence. And those are people that are hired. And by now, everybody in Western capitals, officials in Western capitals, all of them understand the dynamics of the game. And now, if you don't want to do it by an official uniform and by the stick of the Central Security Forces, send others to do the dirty work for you. But by now, there's enough, basically, police IDs that was gathered from